The shadow in the storm. The rain had started just as I left work, light at first, then growing heavier as I drove toward home. The sky was pitch black, thick with storm clouds, and the thunder rolled in deep, rumbling waves. Lightning crackled in the distance, momentarily turning the night into eerie daylight. I gripped the steering wheel tightly, keeping my eyes on the winding road ahead. The rain pounded against my windshield, my wipers barely able to keep up. I was tired, too tired, and every now and then my eyelids threatened to close. Then, in a sudden flash of lightning, I saw it. A shadowy figure stood on the side of the road, just beyond the reach of my headlights. I couldn't make out any details, but the shape was unmistakably human. My stomach twisted. He wasn't walking, wasn't even looking for shelter. He was just standing there, facing the road, watching. I drove past, my pulse quickening. Something about him unsettled me in a way I couldn't explain. I glanced in the rearview mirror, expecting to see his dark form fading into the distance. But he had moved. He wasn't on the side of the road anymore. Now he stood in the middle of it, watching my car disappear into the storm. I swallowed hard and focused on the road ahead, my fingers gripping the wheel so tightly my knuckles ached. The rational part of my mind told me it was just a man, maybe waiting for a ride, maybe just some drifter with nowhere to go. But my gut told me otherwise. Something about him wasn't right. By the time I turned onto my street, the rain had lightened, though the air was still thick with moisture. The familiar glow of porch lights flickered through the mist, and I let out a breath of relief. Home. I was safe now. I pulled into my driveway and turned off the engine. For a moment, I just sat there, letting the hum of the car fade into silence. Then, as if on instinct, I glanced toward the street. My breath caught in my throat. The shadowy figure was there, standing at the far end of my street, just barely visible beneath the dim glow of a street lamp. My mind raced. How? I had been driving for miles. There was no way a man on foot could have kept up with me. No way he could have arrived here before me. A chill ran down my spine. I locked the doors, suddenly hyper-aware of how alone I was. The street was empty. The storm had chased everyone inside. With a shaky breath, I grabbed my keys and forced myself to move. I stepped out of the car, keeping my eyes on the figure at the end of the street. He didn't move. He just stood there watching. I hurried inside, slamming the door behind me and locking it immediately. My wet shoes squeaked against the tile as I backed away from the door. The house was eerily silent, the only sound the ticking of the kitchen clock. I pulled back the curtain and peered outside. The street was empty. The man was gone. I let out a long breath, shaking my head at myself. It was just my imagination. I was exhausted, rattled by the storm, nothing more. Deciding a hot shower would clear my mind, I headed upstairs. Halfway up, I heard it, a faint creak, like a floorboard settling. I froze. My heartbeat thundered in my ears. The sound had come from inside the house. Slowly, I turned my head, staring down into the darkened living room. The storm outside had left deep shadows, making it impossible to see beyond the stairwell. "Hello," I called out, my voice barely above a whisper. Silence. I told myself it was nothing. The house settling. The wind. My nerves. Still, every instinct screamed at me to lock my bedroom door. I took the last few steps two at a time, shoved the door shut behind me, and turned the lock. My room felt safer, quieter. I let out a breath and reached for my phone. Maybe I should call someone. But who? The police? And tell them what? That a man I saw on the road might have followed me home? I was overreacting. Then, a shadow passed by my window. My breath hitched. My house had no balcony, no ledges, no way for anyone to be standing outside my second-floor window. And yet, the shadow moved. I dropped to the floor, my hands shaking as I reached for my phone. My fingers fumbled as I dialed 911. "There's someone outside my house," I whispered, barely able to get the words out. The dispatcher asked me to stay on the line. I barely heard her. My eyes were locked on the window, waiting, dreading the next flash of lightning. When it came, it illuminated the yard below. He was there, standing just beyond the porch light, his face hidden beneath the brim of a hat, his coat soaked from the rain. I choked back a cry. He had followed me home. He had been inside. And now he was waiting. I gripped the phone tighter, my breath coming in shallow gasps as I whispered my address to the dispatcher. The police arrived within minutes. I stayed locked in my room, gripping a lamp like a weapon until I heard them calling out to me. I ran downstairs and threw open the door. The man was still there, standing at the edge of the yard, perfectly still. The officers shouted at him to get down. He didn't move. Only when one of them reached for his gun did he slowly raise his hands and comply. As they cuffed him and led him toward the patrol car, he turned his head slightly toward me. And for the first time, I saw his face. He was smiling. Later, the police told me they had no explanation. The man had no weapons, no ID, no belongings, nothing to suggest he was there to rob or harm me. He refused to speak during questioning. And when they searched him, the only thing they found in his coat pocket was a single waterlogged Polaroid, a photo of my house, taken from inside. Whispers in the storm. The storm had been brewing all evening, thick gray clouds rolling in just as I finished my shift at the diner. By the time I stepped outside, the air was dense with humidity, the scent of rain heavy in my nostrils. I barely had time to grab my umbrella before the first fat drops splattered against the pavement. I hated driving in storms, but my apartment was only 15 minutes away, mostly through back roads lined with thick, looming trees. Normally, the drive was peaceful, even beautiful. But tonight, with the wind howling and the thunder growling low in the distance, those roads felt different, lonely. I pulled out of the parking lot, the rain quickly turning into a downpour. My wipers struggled against the sheets of water as I turned onto the darkened road. There were no streetlights here, just the glow of my headlights cutting through the heavy mist. Every crack of lightning momentarily lit up the woods, casting twisted shadows across the road. And that's when I saw her, a woman standing at the edge of the tree line, just barely visible beyond the reach of my headlights. She was wearing a pale dress, her long hair clinging to her face in the rain. She wasn't moving, just standing there, watching. A chill prickled down my spine. I should have driven past her. I should have kept going. But something about the way she stood there, soaked and alone, made my foot ease off the gas. I pulled to the side of the road, rolling my window down just a crack. "Ma'am? Are you okay?" My voice was barely audible over the storm. She didn't answer. She just lifted a hand, not waving, not gesturing for help, just slowly lifting it, palm facing me. Something in my stomach twisted. I should go. I should go. Lightning flashed, illuminating her face for the briefest second. Her eyes were completely black. A gasp caught in my throat, and I slammed my foot on the gas, my tires skidding against the wet road as I sped away. My hands trembled on the wheel, my breath coming in sharp, shallow bursts. What the hell did I just see? I forced myself to glance in the rearview mirror. She was gone, but the uneasy feeling stayed. I wasn't alone on this road. The voices in the rain. The rain grew heavier as I turned onto the stretch of road that led to my apartment complex. Trees loomed on either side, their gnarled branches bending under the weight of the storm. The wind had picked up, howling like something alive. Then I heard it. A voice. A soft, whispering voice, almost drowned out by the storm. I glanced at the radio. It was off. I gripped the steering wheel tighter, swallowing against the fear crawling up my throat. I was hearing things. That's all. Just the wind playing tricks on me. The whispers grew louder. Not one voice. Many. They weren't coming from the radio. They were coming from inside the car. Panic surged through me, and I jerked my head toward the passenger seat. For a split second, just a split second, I saw a figure sitting there, drenched, pale, dark, hollow eyes staring at me. I screamed, swerving violently. My car skidded, tires screeching as I fought for control. My heart pounded so hard I thought it would burst. When I dared to look again, the seat was empty. The whispers had stopped. I was gasping for breath, my hands shaking as I pulled into my apartment complex. My headlights washed over the rain-slick pavement, my usual parking spot waiting for me like a silent refuge. But I didn't feel safe. Not anymore. The figure in the hallway. I practically ran from my car to my apartment, my soaked clothes clinging to me. The moment I was inside, I locked the door, double-checking it twice. My breathing was still ragged, my nerves shot to hell. I forced myself to take deep breaths. It was just the storm, just exhaustion. I had probably imagined the woman's eyes, imagined the voices, imagined the figure in my car. My brain was playing tricks on me. I needed to calm down. I peeled off my wet jacket, kicking off my shoes as I moved toward the bathroom. A hot shower would clear my mind. But then, a floorboard creaked. I froze. The sound had come from the hallway. I turned my head slowly, my breath caught in my throat. For a long moment, nothing moved. The hallway was dark, the shadows deep. Then, lightning flashed through the window, and I saw her, standing at the end of the hallway, the woman from the road. Her dripping hair hung in tangled strands across her face, her soaked dress clinging to her frail frame. Her lips didn't move, but I heard her voice, whispering inside my head. "Let me in." I staggered backward, my pulse hammering in my ears. No, this wasn't real. I squeezed my eyes shut, shaking my head violently. When I opened them, she was gone. The flooded nightmare. The storm raged on outside, rain hammering against the windows like desperate fingers trying to get in. I curled up on the couch, gripping my phone, my thumb hovering over the emergency call button. I should call someone, but what would I even say? That a ghost, or whatever the hell she was, had followed me home? I was losing it. I turned on the TV, hoping for some background noise to drown out my thoughts. The flickering screen cast a soft glow over the living room. Felt normal, safe, until the TV screen flickered and went black. The power was out. The apartment plunged into darkness. I sucked in a shaky breath, my heart racing. Then, in the pitch-black silence, I heard it. Drip, drip, drip. The sound of water, but not from the storm. It was coming from inside the apartment. My blood ran cold. Slowly, trembling, I turned my head toward the bathroom. The door was ajar, and inside, in the dim, pulsing light from a distant lightning flash, a wet footprint appeared on the floor. Then another, and another, coming toward me. I didn't scream, couldn't. My voice was trapped in my throat as pure, suffocating terror took hold of me. The whispers returned, closer this time, swirling around me like an unseen storm. "Let me in." Then, a knock at the door. I jumped, spinning toward the sound. The room was empty. I hesitated, every muscle in my body screaming, "Don't open it." But I moved anyway. Slowly, cautiously, I pressed my eye to the peephole. The hallway was empty. No one was there. No storm. No whispers. Just silence. I exhaled shakily, pressing my forehead against the door. Maybe I really was losing it. Then, just as I turned away, a single, wet handprint appeared on the door, right next to my face. The forgotten cabin. The storm rolled in faster than I expected. I had been driving for hours, winding through the back roads of Virginia, trying to find my way to the rental cabin I had booked for the weekend. The GPS signal had cut out miles ago, leaving me to rely on a crumpled printout of directions. The rain came down in thick sheets, hammering against the windshield. My wipers struggled against it, barely giving me a clear view of the road. Thunder rumbled low and deep, the kind that made your bones vibrate. I gripped the wheel tighter. I was alone on this road. No streetlights, no signs, not even another car in sight. Just dense forest on either side, their shadows stretching toward the road like reaching hands. The directions said the cabin would be on the right, a small dirt path leading up to it. I squinted through the rain, scanning the roadside, and then there, a barely visible break in the trees. I turned onto the narrow, muddy path, my tires kicking up wet gravel as I eased forward. The headlights cut through the darkness, illuminating the small cabin at the end of the road. It was old, much older than the pictures had shown. The wood was dark and weathered, the windows black and lifeless. Something about it made my stomach tighten. But I had come too far to turn back now. A door that shouldn't open. I parked the car, the engine ticking as I shut it off. The storm raged around me, the wind howling through the trees like something alive. I grabbed my bag and made a run for the porch, my boots slipping in the mud. The key was supposed to be in a lockbox by the door, but when I reached for it, the door creaked open on its own. I froze. No one was supposed to be here. "Hello," I called, peering inside. My voice was swallowed by the darkness. I hesitated, my skin crawling. But the storm was only getting worse, and I wasn't about to spend the night in my car. I stepped inside. The air was thick with the scent of damp wood and something else, something stale. Dust floated in the air, disturbed by my entrance. I reached for the light switch, flicking it on. Nothing. Power must be out from the storm. I fumbled for my phone, turning on the flashlight. The small beam barely cut through the darkness, casting long shadows along the wooden walls. The cabin was smaller than I expected. Just a single room with an old fireplace, a rickety wooden table, and a narrow bed pushed against the far wall. I shivered. The air felt wrong, stagnant, like no one had stepped inside for years. I nudged the door closed, the hinges groaning. The lock didn't work. I told myself it didn't matter. I just needed one night. Then I'd be gone. The footsteps in the storm. I changed into dry clothes and wrapped myself in a blanket. My phone the only source of light in the room. The wind howled outside, rain slamming against the cabin like something desperate to get in. Then, footsteps. Not inside. Outside. Slow. Deliberate. Circling the cabin. My breath caught in my throat. I turned off my phone's light, plunging the room into darkness. The footsteps didn't stop. Crunch. 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 They moved toward the front porch. Closer. I swallowed hard, inching toward the window. My heart pounded against my ribs. I forced myself to peek through the glass. Lightning flashed. For the briefest second, the outside world was illuminated in a blinding white light. And I saw something standing at the edge of the trees. Tall. Motionless. Watching. But in the darkness, when the lightning faded, it was gone. Something was inside. I backed away from the window, my breath shaky. Maybe it was an animal. Maybe the wind was playing tricks on me. But I couldn't shake the feeling that I wasn't alone. The air inside the cabin had changed. It felt heavier. I turned, my phone's dim glow catching the edges of the room. Nothing had moved. And yet, something felt different. Then I noticed it. The bed. I had left the blanket folded when I arrived. Now it was pulled back, like someone had been lying there. A wave of cold washed over me. I gripped my phone tighter, scanning the room. My ears strained against the storm, trying to catch the sound of breathing. Nothing, but my gut screamed at me. Something was here. I needed to leave. The locked door. I grabbed my bag and bolted for the door. I twisted the handle. It wouldn't budge. I yanked harder. The door was stuck. Behind me, the air shifted. A whisper brushed against my ear. "You shouldn't be here." My stomach dropped. I spun around, my flashlight beam cutting across the empty room. The cabin was silent, but I wasn't alone. I could feel it. Something was watching me. I pressed my back against the door, my breath shallow. My fingers fumbled with the handle. I yanked, twisted, finally the door gave way. I stumbled into the storm, the rain drenching me instantly. My car was only a few feet away. I sprinted toward it, my boots splashing in the mud. I didn't dare look back. I didn't want to see what was standing in the doorway, the passenger. I yanked open my car door, throwing myself inside. My hands shook as I jammed the keys into the ignition. The engine roared to life. Headlights flooded the cabin, making it look even older, even more wrong. For the briefest moment, I thought I saw something in the window, a face. But then the rain blurred the glass, and it was gone. I threw the car into reverse, tires skidding against the wet ground. I didn't stop driving. Not until I was miles away, the storm fading into the distance. I didn't even realize I was crying until I wiped my face. I should have felt safe. I should have felt relieved. But then, a new sound. A wet, raspy breath. From the back seat, a whisper brushed against my ear, cold and familiar. I told you, you shouldn't be here. And then, the car jerked, the headlights flickered, the engine died, and in the suffocating darkness, I felt it. Something moving behind me.